great to be back at Loughton Station. It's like walking down the bridge of the USS Enterprise, I think. We will be hopefully partly following the Three Forests way today. So we're off to the forest and beyond the forest as well. Here we are in Loughton, heading towards Epping Forest. That was my first time catching a tube to the start of a walk since the lockdown. Since March. It's a big deal for me. I've only caught the tube twice before, and that was late at night heading home from the edges. It's going to be a great walk today. I'm really excited about it. I'll tell you more about it when we get up here. This is interesting. This is the Royal Oak. What was the Royal Oak pub? I'm sure some of you will remember drinking in there. And now it's Royal Oak House. I don't know. It looks like private flats. But for many years this was my standard route into the forest. Just along Forest Road here. And here is literally Epping Forest at the end of the road. You really can't miss it at all. And here we have the gentle waters of the Loughton Brook. I've walked along the course of this river and made a video. I'll link to that below. It's a really beautiful little stream. And we just go up and over the edge of this pond here and into the forest proper. It's so beautiful just to be back in the rump of the forest. Well, this shows you how little rain we've had. The Loughton Brook is basically dried up. There's not a drop of water in here, is there? So the plan for today is to follow the Three Forests way. Basically up through Epping Forest here, up round the edge of Loughton Camp, up through to High Beach, and then there's a beautiful view of the hills around Waltham Abbey, which is a wonderful spot. It's one of my favourite spots in the forest, and that really was what I was aiming for today actually, was just to take this one particular viewpoint. However, I've got a real desire to be out in the fields, out in the countryside, and a couple of weeks ago I actually walked from Leytonstone out through here, out to the fields around Upshire, around Warlies Park, and then back through to Epping. I did it actually just after uploading a video, so I didn't make a video of it, and I thought it'd be really lovely to do a variation on that walk with you today, because it's just so beautiful to be in this main or rump of the forest, to experience those fields around Upshire. I thought we'd go up to Epping Green, and then we've got a few options, most likely then coming back down through the fields to Epping, hopefully, if we do okay. It's 2:30, so we've got about 6 hours of decent daylight, so we should have enough time. Famous last words, I know, famous last words. But this is just such an amazing place to be out here in Epping Forest. We're just so lucky to have this here in London, on the edge of London, on the border between London and Essex. We are now actually in Essex. Loughton is in Essex. But this is London's forest, the People's Forest, as declared by Queen Victoria. I think it was in 1884 or 1882. It's really quite warm today. At the moment it's about 25-26 degrees, but apparently it's rising to a high of around 28-29 by late afternoon. I know my Australian viewers slightly laugh at the suggestion that that is hot, but these things are all relative. Also, my Australian wife, she finds this quite warm as well, so maybe she's acclimatised to Northern Europe. But people often ask me to recommend an Epping Forest walk, and I think certainly for your first one this is a really good route to take for the first section, not the bit where we strike out into the uplands. In fact, actually I'm going to leave this path here. I like to take this approach through the trees up to Loughton Camp. You can follow that gravel path quite close to Loughton Camp and then just come off the path into Loughton Camp, but I like to approach it from this angle down here. So you come off basically the dip of that path before it rises, and then you have to climb the steep outer bank of Loughton Camp, and it really highlights how imposing a sight Loughton Camp really would have been, particularly when it had ramparts around the outer trenches. It would have been a really impressive sight. So this walk here up to Honey Lane Quarters is a great walk from Loughton, and then you can either come back or you can go down to Thaden Boys, or you can carry on through the forest to Epping. It's a fantastic introduction to the wonders of Epping Forest. And this is where the path now is starting to climb the outer embankment of Loughton Camp in a way, or the ridge that supports Loughton Camp. It's quite a steep climb up through here. In the winter months, this is very muddy, this climb here. It's quite difficult. I've got a walking pole with me today and I doubt I'll need it, but in the winter, without the walking pole, it's very difficult to navigate a lot of these paths in Epping Forest. And you can see a lot of the trees here show signs of lopping, when the commoners of the forest could gather their wood, come out here on St Martin's Eve and gather their wood. And now Lopping Hall in Loughton was given in exchange for the commoners losing their lopping rights. These trees have stories. The stories they could tell, eh? The things that they've seen. I like this idea of trees as living things, recording memories, recording the emotions of people that pass by. They're somehow stored in these giant living beings, these great sentinels of the forest. I like, well, my mate Nick Papadimitriou, he refers to kind of concrete objects as being like storage vats of regional memory, but trees in a lot of ways are almost literal storage vats of memory. They really are. There's a belief as well that now that trees and fungi are able to communicate with each other, that they are in some way perhaps sentient, and that there are networks beneath the ground here of fungi, of living entities that could be kilometres in diameter or in span. They could spread that far. Living organisms that have been around for, well, at least centuries, if not longer, which is an incredible idea, isn't it? There's so much more we'll learn about the natural world as time goes on. So here we are, looking at the outer bank of Loughton Camp, the majestic Iron Age earthwork. So here's some interpretation material, courtesy of the City of London, who manage Epping Forest brilliantly. I love this old plan of Loughton Camp. It was only really excavated properly in the 19th century, actually by amateur archaeologists, I should say as well. And they say it dates from 500 BC, probably used as animal folds, or lookout posts or boundary markers. It's not really sure what it was. See the bank falling away on the far side there. It goes all the way down. Obviously it's been eroded over time. So looking back here, we're looking inside the camp. There's not much of a inner embankment, but there would have been once upon a time here. I think one of the things that archaeologists have learnt about these sites is that they had different uses over different periods of time. It wasn't like they were just built, this one was built in 500 BC and used by the people who built it. It would have been built continuously over a long period of time. The belief was that perhaps it was used as a place to keep animals. It could have been used as a gathering place. One thing it's unlikely to have been is an actual fort for military purposes. There's another site further into the forest that way called Amesbury Bank, and Amesbury Banks is associated obviously with the Boudicca myth. Some people believe that's where Boudicca made her final stand against the Romans. There's very little evidence of any of that really. and this is something I've discussed in previous videos, and there's some really great comments from people about what kind of archaeological evidence you would expect to find and whether it may still be there. However, the great Dave Binns, who I've made some videos with on this channel, and I urge you, if you haven't seen them, to have a look at them. Dave pointed out actually that if you look at when a lot of these sites were excavated and surveyed, a lot of time it was during the period of kind of like colonial expansion, of imperialism. It was quite a kind of militaristic period. So they saw earthworks like this through the prism of their age. They saw them as being defensive or militaristic. So all they really were doing was reflecting the priorities of their era rather than what the evidence suggested. A lot of the time all they've really found here are like pots and pot shards and animal bones. I don't believe they found weapons, or certainly not large enough amounts of weapons. I don't know if they've even found human remains, which you would expect on a battle site, wouldn't you? But it's a really majestic location. I really love it here. In the winter I was coming up here on a Sunday afternoon, about the same time we are now, but with a 4:30 sunset, and walking that path up to here and just sitting on this outer bank and looking out through the trees as the light died and the sun got lower, and it was cutting through the trees about just above the height of the outer bank, and it was really beautiful. And you could sense something was coming this year. I mean, winter's always a slightly troubled time sometimes, isn't it? Midwinter. And I found a great comfort in coming out here and just sitting on this bank here, on this outer bank, and drawing from the millennia of human interaction with this site and what the people that built it may have believed or may have thought, what they took from this location. It may have just been a site that had great kind of communal value to them, and in those kind of quiet, dark winter moments you could sit here and kind of draw on it, but using your imagination, just place yourself in that period, in that time, with the values of that time and the beliefs of that time. Nice little exercise. I love being here. So I think the sensible thing now to do is to get down or back onto the Three Forests Way and follow it through the forest up to High Beach. I was going to say that's enough of that hippie nonsense, but I think we might be encountering more of it as we go along the path here, because hopefully we should go towards the Boudicca Obelisk, connecting up with the links between the Queen of the Iceni and Epping Forest. Not that that's kind of hippie stuff, but you know what I mean. It's certainly not it's certainly not hard archaeology, that's for sure. That's one of the biggest challenges of this walk, getting safely across this road here, which I've managed to do. And then we climb this bank and go up through the gate. So just up here is one of the few sort of busy points in the forest. We've got a car park here. There's the pub, I think it's the Royal Oak pub, and there's a tea hut. A lot of families come here to enjoy the open space at High Beach. We're going to push on through here because we want to avoid the crowds. This is a very helpful map to see where we are in relation to the forest as a whole. So we're right near the top end of the forest here. And here's a more detailed map. King's Oak pub, so it's not the Royal Oak, sorry, the King's Oak pub. High Beach viewing spot. That's not the viewing spot I want to take you to, so we'll ignore that one. And you've got the picnic area and stuff, so we're here. So we're going to carry on over the road and off up this way. These gate numbers are useful. Gate 62, the General's Ride, which is the name of the path, and the Pillow Mounds. Wow, what a great tree this is. These trees here have gathered for a conversation. I wonder what they're talking about. are in for a treat just on the bend of this path here. I regard this as possibly the finest view in Epping Forest. I would say this is actually better in the winter. There's these two massive trees there that block out some of the view, and obviously when they are bare and without leaves in the winter you get a clear view to the hills surrounding Waltham Abbey. We can see here some of the hills that I was walking around on my first walk of 2020. I'll link to that video below. It's majestic, isn't it? So that is more or less the direction we are walking. We won't be going as far as the kind of line of houses you could see there, but we'll certainly be heading in that general direction. So we better crack on. It's nearly 4 o'clock. So that's interesting here. The sign shows it's 19.5 miles to Hatfield Forest. That's part of the Three Forests Way. Got to get across this road somehow. Once over the road, we're just going to take this path round to the left, which skirts the edge of a farm. There's still farms around Epping Forest. We're going to take this little lane here, which will lead to a really quite curious location. So when I came down here a couple of weeks ago, it was the first time I'd actually walked along this lane, and I had no idea these gates were here across the road. It's quite grand, isn't it? And we're now entering the Woodredon and Warley's Estate. You're entering another realm once you pass through this gate. And I suppose in the days when these grand houses here were in private hands, this would have been the gatehouse. And now on the other side of the gate is this beautiful little country lane leading us to Upshire. There's another large house in here, Woodredon House. As you can see it through the trees there. I have no idea what this house is used for now. I think it's some sort of residential care centre, I believe. There are a number of quite grand houses out here. Copt Hall and Warlies Park I was already aware of. I'd never heard of Woodredon House before. Or is it Woodrodon? Can you see on the maps it's interchangeable. It's Woodredon and Woodrodon. I don't know. And the farmhouse back there actually is even bigger than Woodredon House there. It's quite a grand, it looks Georgian. And then you have Copt Hall, which is a very grand house. The current house is Georgian, is 18th century. And then Warley's house, which we won't pass today, but it's in a previous video. We will go through Warlies Park, hopefully. Imagine the life of those grand houses once upon a time. I always think it from the point of view of all the vast number of people that would have worked on those estates. They would have employed an awful lot of people, both in the house and on the land. As I've mentioned before, it's often the stories of those people, the people that really made this landscape and made this land. They're the stories that are so rarely recorded. I suppose they're recorded in the land, recorded in the place. Forest Way. It's a lovely view back towards Epping Forest there. And this is another magnificent view. This is a really beautiful meadow here, looking to those fields around the edge of Waltham Abbey. When I came here in the evening a few weeks ago, this field was alive with rabbits. Now we follow this track down to the M25 London Orbital Motorway. Crossing the M25 always feels like a big moment on any walk, particularly during this period. You can take the footpath that leads across these fields here. That would take you down to Waltham Abbey. We going in a slightly different direction today. We're going to head towards Warlies Park and then up towards Epping Long Green. It's so great to be back out in the countryside after spending about at least 4 months confined within the city. It's just, I need these kind of open spaces, although obviously the serenading by the M25 is a factor, but just to be out in the fields is so liberating and nourishing. Hopefully we're going to break out into the fields even further now for a little while before turning back for Epping. We could go down towards Waltham Abbey. We have choices. We are free whilst we are just guided by our feet and this quite useful path. Here we are in the village of Upshire. Upshire's a lovely name, isn't it? Passing through really. There is a pub in Upshire, a really nice pub I came to once with Gary Lammin and Dave Binns, but no time for that today. We're going to head for Warlies Park. And isn't this a sight for sore eyes? Warley's house, the grand house, is just down there. I'll put some footage in from the walk I did past there a couple of years ago in the winter. And this park here, these grounds were landscaped in the 18th century. And this temple on the hill is a kind of classic feature from that era when the landed gentry were doing their grand tours and wanting to kind of recreate part of the classical world on their estates. Probably one of the grandest articulations of that is at West Wickham House in Buckinghamshire. Sound of a bird of prey, a hawk of some description. Something I hadn't noticed before is there's a wonderful view here of the Boudicca Obelisk on that hill there. Can you see it? And that's to commemorate the association of the Boudicca myth with this landscape, that this is where Boudicca finally met her end after fleeing the Romans. It's another one of those historical mysteries which is still waiting to be solved, is where did Boudicca make her last stand against the Romans? There are a number of candidates. One of them is Amesbury Banks in Epping Forest, another one of the Iron Age earthworks there. And according to the legend, or one of the legends, is that she died up in the highlands just beyond that point, beyond that camp. That hill, I think, was chosen because it overlooks the Cobbins Brook, and it's believed that that is where she died. Either that she bled out in the Cobbins Brook, or that she took poison berries and laid down beside the river to finally expire. And that obelisk on the hill there commands that landscape of the myth of Boudicca. This really is a land of romance and legend, and I've said that a number of times before, haven't I? With these fields and hills around London are just littered with myths and legends. I think I'm going to go and sit in the shade of that oak tree and check the map. So we are here, Temple Hill. So at the bottom of this field here, we can pick up the Three Forests Way. We'll work our way along the Three Forests Way to Epping Long Green, along here to Epping Green, and then further up. And then we can pick up the footpaths that zigzag their way down to Epping. That's the plan anyway. I don't know if we've got enough time to actually do that, but let's give it a go, shall we? And time for a snack. I'm going to have half a flapjack, kind of Classic walking food, this, isn't it? Right, we best crack on. We've got quite a few miles still to do. So the temperature's gone up now, it's 28 degrees. And that'll be the peak for today. And we're looking at a sunset or at 8:38. And that's the footpath there, just going past Obelisk Farm. So I think we should take a little detour to go and pay homage to Queen Boudicca, Queen of the Iceni. I think when I came out here before, I was reading Peter Ackroyd's book Foundation about the early years of England, however you want to define that. But also I've recently listened to a fantastic podcast about Roman Britain. I will link it below. It's here on YouTube. It's fantastic. And they really kind of break down that period of Roman occupation in Britain and how actually quite anarchic and disruptive it was. Boudicca's rebellion is the one that we remember, the one that we talk about. And it was the one that essentially brought the Roman Empire to its knees in Britain. It was an incredibly viciously executed rebellion, both on the part of the Iceni and the tribes that allied with them. I mean, they massacred the entire population, the entire Roman garrison of Colchester, and they burnt London to the ground. And the evidence of that is found in the earth in London. There's a thick line of black ash at the point at which Boudicca burnt the city to its ground, and they found skulls in the Walbrook that could well have been the result of the executions that took place after they sacked Roman London. And of course then the Roman reprisal was brutal, leading to Boudicca eventually dying perhaps in the Epping uplands, perhaps on the banks of the Cobbins Brook down there. But what this podcast explains is that actually the entire era of Roman occupation was incredibly disrupted by rebellion, misrule by the Romans, Roman governors of Britain breaking away from Rome, in fact going back to try to invade Rome and taking the garrison with them and leaving Britain undefended, in which case it would be raided by the Scots and the Irish and raiders from across the sea. It was an incredibly turbulent period, the way it's explained by this gentleman in the podcast. Quite at odds with the idea of this sort of almost halcyon period of 400 years of settled good governance by the Romans. I mean, what did the Romans ever do for us, eh? So go straight through the trees here. On the other side of the lane, hopefully we're going to follow it around a farm and we're back on the Three Forests Way. Wow. It's wonderful to join the dots on the Ordnance Survey map to chart the terrain with your feet, you know, after many evenings of studying the map at home or in the pub, plotting walks, and then to finally be out here. It's such an exhilarating feeling. It's interesting looking at the Ordnance Survey map because according to that, the path kind of cuts across the middle of this field here and then turns a left somewhere around the middle. So that's interesting. I'm actually going to stick to this area along the edge of the wood here. I have a very strong suspicion at this stage that I have lost the path or it's been rerouted. So I am just going to have to follow the edge of this field and the line of these trees, which is significantly longer than the route marked out on the map, which just seems to cut across this field on the left here and goes up that way, whereas I'm going to have to go all the way around the edge. But that's the safer option, I think. This is a very strange experience. I am now just actually cutting across the field here because I can see on the map that the footpath cuts right across there, parallel to the end of that wood, and it cuts across and meets the end of this wood down there. I think it's a case of it's one of those footpaths. This must have been a field of wheat or corn. It's one of those footpaths that would have been cut across the wheat field, so you'd have been easy to follow it. But obviously look, it's all cleared earth. It's quite a strange experience. Yeah, and I know for sure that the edge of that wood there, that isn't the route. So there you go, back to the tree line here. Taking these white posts as the boundary markers or the footpath markers. And we're descending into the valley of the pylons, which I think follow the course of the Brook. The absence of footpath signage is a little bit of a concern for such a well signposted route previously, but I think I can follow it on the map. It looks like it's in the corner there, and then we head up that way. Yep, that's a relief. So I was following the right way, and that's going to take us up this beautiful field here. So here, peaceful babbling waters of the Brook, where legend has it Boudicca finally met her end. Her blood possibly trickling down into the waters to merge with the land and with time. On the other hand, it may be completely made up. I find it important to find the footpath and to follow the footpaths, not just because I'm a particularly keen adherent to the countryside code, you know, close gates behind you, always follow the footpaths, etc. Although that is important, but also I've too many times had the experience where I've lost a footpath and I've been in a farm field or on farmland, and you can find yourself walking for a mile or two and then realise that you're trapped in a field, that there's no way out. There's a thick hedge and a deep ditch all the way around it, and you've got no choice but to walk back the way you came and to retrace your footsteps. That's happened to me too many times. So I'm very reluctant to go too far off the footpath on farmland. Just for that reason alone, it makes sense to stick to the footpaths. This is another landscape which makes me think of the Detectorists, probably my favourite TV show. It's coming up to 6 o'clock and this sun is really quite hot. I can really feel it burning my skin. Obviously I've got sun cream on, but even so you can really feel the heat against your flesh. So it looks like the footpath is taking us right through the farmyard and past the farmhouse. Seems very quiet up here. This is interesting. I assume this is the footpath. It's a load of broken up rubble. I guess it's going to be topped off to make a road, I guess. Doubling back on my earlier comment about not losing the footpath, it doesn't look right walking over all that broken brick, so I'm going to take this little path here up to the farm buildings, hopefully. Well, that does appear to have been right. Here's the footpath on the other side of the farm track, and we can continue to follow it this way. Well, I've negotiated that successfully, which is a relief, and now we're on a straight path, hopefully up to Epping Long Green. A little bit of indecision at this point. I think the footpath carries on here, but there is also another footpath which follows the curve of this field. I'm not sure what to do. My instinct is to carry straight on across here. Let's do that, shall we? Wow, they are some views looking back towards London. You can see the towers of London in the distance there. It's astonishing. Well, it looks as if I was wrong. There's no way out of this field. Thankfully it wasn't very far to come, and it did give me those amazing views. So I'm just going to go back down this field and around the edge. Hopefully find the footpath on the in that corner down there. This is the right path now, and it leads me beneath this glorious pylon here. It's casting its shadow on the field. Well, this is a lovely sight. The footpath sign here beside the field. And that's the way ahead. I remember this section of Epping Long Green. I still can't remember where I was walking, but I remember coming through here one day. I was heading in this direction, And there was a big group of ramblers. I think one of the Ramblers Associations, probably the West Essex Ramblers, were walking along here as well. There were about 50 people. It's always great when you cross paths with the previous walk. I remember that day, and I knew that I'd walked along Epping Long Green for a portion of it. I still can't remember. I was heading that way towards, I guess it would have been towards Waltham Abbey. It might have been the day I walked to Galley Hill Wood. Sounds about right. It was about 3 years ago, I think, so it really brings back that period for me. Of course, that would have been a kind of autumn or winter Sunday afternoon, as opposed to a Thursday summer's evening. Go over this little rickety bridge here. Try not to disturb any trolls. This is looking out across Nazeingwood Common, and that's been a location that's been on my list for a while. It's a glorious tract of land, isn't it? Epping Long Green continues around that bend there. It's interesting to see little local buses running, and there's a pub on this corner here, although it doesn't look open, luckily for me. The Traveller's Friend. The Traveller's Friend today, if it's not open. The old village pump. So there's a little footpath here beside what I imagine was once the village school. Or no, it's the village church, Epping Green Chapel. So there's a little path here which takes me, heading back in the direction of Epping now. So where my thumb is, and the path heads down towards the sewage works. This is lovely, moving in to the evening light now. It's coming up to 7:10. As many of you will know who've watched my videos in the past, it's this last hour or two of light that I love the best in a walk. Sometimes I feel like the whole thing, if I do a really long day walk, sometimes it feels like it's all about arriving at this moment. Of course, the trick now is to time it so that I'm in the right spot for sunset, or in a good spot for sunset, and I don't actually end up finishing the walk too soon. Or indeed, if you're too far away, you might have to walk along a narrow country road in the dark, which is always a little bit perilous. So you don't want either of those situations. I think we'll be all right. I can see Epping from here, actually. I can see the church there on the edge of Epping. This is great. This little bridge into a field of borage. How wonderful. A diagonal path across it. Of course, when you're walking through a field of borage, you are also walking through a field of bees. Well, they're very friendly bees anyway, and they're too preoccupied with gathering nectar from this wonderful blue flowers. I think they're sometimes called starflower, aren't they? I'm going to cut through the churchyard here, partly because there's no way of walking on the road, so I hope it takes me to where I want to go. It looks as though the main body of this church could be quite old, couldn't it? I know it's sometimes quite difficult to tell. I shall have to look it up. Now a little bit of road walking with no pavement, which I love. We survived the road, and this is the vista we're greeted with. These are our last few fields, and you can see the edge of Epping there in the distance. And through there, that dark ridge, that's the edge of Epping Forest, where we were So what time did we leave Epping Forest? About 4 o'clock, about 3.5 hours ago we left the edge of Epping Forest, or maybe about 5 o'clock. There's that beautiful smell of damp summer evening grass. It's really intoxicating. Soundtracked by the cooing of the wood pigeon. The final 2 fields before we hit the streets on the edge of Epping. And there's the footpath there, snaking across this beautiful field to the houses on the far side, on the edge of the town of Epping. What a beautiful walk it's been, and a perfect ending going across this field here to the streets on the edge of the town. Perfect forest and field path ramble from Loughton up to Loughton Camp, through Epping Forest, then up to Epping, the Epping Uplands and Upshire, Epping Long Green, and down here across the fields back to the town of Epping to get the tube home from Epping. There's far too many Eppings in there, aren't there? I can tell this isn't scripted. I just want to thank you so much for coming with me. What a joy to have you along on this walk. It feels like a real kind of liberating breaking out into the countryside. Such a necessary part of the process of passing through this quite extraordinary year. So thanks for coming along with me. Thanks also to my supporters on Patreon. And as ever, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk. I really don't have any idea where that will be. Wherever that may be, really could be wherever that may be. It could be somewhere really surprising, or it might be somewhere less surprising, who knows. Whatever and wherever it is, I'll see you there. Have a great week, take care of yourselves.